We'll begin today's exercise with our daily affirmations. I am a good man. I wouldn't hurt anybody because I am a good person.
I wouldn't hurt
My
anybody.
friends are good people. They wouldn't hurt anybody because they are good people. I would know a bad man. I would stop him from hurting anybody. Because he is a bad person. And he is not like me.
Because he is a bad person.
Thank God for good men.
Thank God for good men.
Repetition legitimizes. In crafting narrative through lines and subtext, writers often employ the use of motif, a recurring concept, object, idea, phrase, etc., that appears again and again throughout the story. Think of them as the flux that allows the audience to bind textual elements, what's actually occurring in the story, with various subtextual elements, things like the overarching theme of a narrative, characters' unspoken feelings and motivations, and generally any idea the writer wants to convey with subtlety. Motifs can take many forms.
A prayer that's always recited the same but feels different depending on the character and context of its recitation.
Fear is the mind killer. I will face my fear. I will let it pass through me.
I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me.
And I'll face my fear and I'll permit it to pass over me and through me.
A campsite of friends and comrades that slowly and quietly disintegrates as grandiose dreams of freedom crash onto the rocky shores of reality.
Dutch. Think.
Dutch. Be practical now.
A tattoo of a dragon, representing a great profanity and the cost of surviving it.
Mouthwashing is a 2024 indie horror video game release from Swedish developer Wrong Organ. It's a small scale, narrative heavy, and about 4 hours tops to clear, so if you want to get off the ride before I get into spoiler territory, this is your sign. In Mouthwashing, like those previously mentioned works, we're given a grounding element in the body of Curly, captain of the interstellar shipping freighter, the Tulpar. When we meet Curly, and for most of the game, we see him as a red, moaning, dripping, skinless quadruple amputee who can't do anything for himself but squall and cry for help. He is a literal man-baby, relying on Anya, the ship's only female crew member and sole nursing professional, to literally change his soiled bedclothes, feed him, and give him his bottle, which in Curly's case is an insufficient dose of oxycodone for a third-degree burn victim and amputee. How Curly came to be in this state forms the heart of Mouthwashing's overall story, which starts with the player, whether they want to or not, going through a series of actions in the Tulpar's cockpit that put the ship on a collision course with an asteroid. The Tulpar is scuttled on impact, saved only by an emergency foam dispenser that keeps the hull just on the brink of catastrophic decompression and effectively locks the small crew into a tiny, claustrophobic ring of about 5 rooms. The story plays out in a non-linear fashion, mostly from the perspective of Jimmy, Curly's second in command, who is doing his meager best to manage the ship and its crew as supplies dwindle in the months following the crash. Along with Curly, Anya, and Jimmy, we have the ship's mechanic, Swansea, and his young apprentice, Daisuke. Swansea is the oldest member of the crew, by far the surliest, and he's openly disrespectful of Jimmy's emergency promotion to captain. Daisuke, on the other hand, is warm, cheerful, to a fault, and does his best to be helpful despite his limited skill set. He's a stark contrast to Swansea, but they play well off each other, though the latter plays up how little he wants a stupid kid like Daisuke around. The main section of the game opens with a routine we return to throughout Mouthwashing, feeding Curly his meds. Curly is, to repeat, little more than a baby at this point, with Jimmy and especially Anya serving as, essentially, his overburdened and exhausted parents. Jimmy, despite not having any actual duties or helpful skills, is busy running the ship, and he lets Anya have it for not being able to handle Curly's care all on her own. She's not a doctor, after all, which he reminds her of, though even if she was, it wouldn't make a difference. No amount of medical know-how could turn the Tulpar's meager medical resources, essentially a high school nurse's office with a generous supply of mid-grade opioids, into a functioning burn ward. Obviously, there's a degree of dramatic license taken in a video game, but I think we can just give this one to Anya that she performed a medical miracle keeping Curly alive at all. Just for example, this is the methodology used to save a patient with second-degree burns over 95% of his body in Saudi Arabia from a medical study entitled Survival from 95% Total Body Surface Area Burn, a case report and literature review.
As for the initial evaluation, the patient's temperature was 39 degrees Celsius, tachycardiac with a 140 pulse rate. Respiration was 26 breaths per minute, and hypotensive with a blood pressure of 71/50 millimeters of mercury. The entire body has been burned except for a very small part of the foot, with total burn surface area that was estimated to be approximately 95%, which is second-degree superficial. The patient was started with oxygen by oxygen mask. Ringer's lactate 1 liter, and the initial medical protocol of burn management was initiated including pethidine 100 mg intravenously, IV, metoclopramide 10 mg IV, hydrocortisone 100 mg IV, plasma 500 ml IV, midazolam 3 mg IV, fentanyl 100 mg IV, and followed by mechanical ventilation. Fluid replacement was monitored using a central venous catheter by the help of an anesthesiologist and adjusted according to the urine output to maintain it approximately of more than 0.5 to 1 milliliters an hour. Upon admission, baseline laboratory investigations were taken, as shown in Table 1. Even if we think it's important to give Anya credit for this, Jimmy doesn't, focusing instead on the irritation of still having to deal with the former captain, whom he openly blames for the crew's current misfortunes. In Jimmy's mind, the operation of the ship plays out as a series of quests, showing his on-screen objectives being checked off as completed. Despite how easy it all is, Curly, for some reason, still just couldn't hack it. But Jimmy seems to be doing just fine in the role. Better even.
And that's not too generous an estimation on his part. The actual operations of the ship, as we come to see, are quite simplistic compared to the more specialized positions like mechanic or nurse.
The captain's largest responsibility is, essentially, possession of a special blacklight that lets him read the codes used to unlock a handful of dangerous or restricted items on the ship: an axe, a gun, cake ingredients, and, of course, the hatch to the freighter's main storage hold. Using the blacklight gun to unlock these items forms, essentially, the near entirety of the tasks Jimmy, and later Curly, complete aboard the Tulper. The ship navigates preset courses, guided by an autopilot that's so literally locked in to automatically navigating that a key is required to change coordinates. There are even cryogenic pods that would conceivably let a crew member sleep through massive legs of the trip. Curly's, and later Jimmy's, only real responsibilities on the Tulper are to prevent any tampering with their confidential shipment, and maintaining order aboard the vessel. This is best shown by the "in case of emergencies" box usually kept in the cockpit, which simply contains a gun, and can only be opened with the captain's blacklight.
Generally, though, order is kept on board by the simple threat of having one's pay docked for violations of the Pony Express Company's Code of Conduct, which leaves something of a gulf of deterrent between lethal force and a slight reduction of pay. The Pony Express Company seems to have a great deal of faith in their employees' interpersonal relations, however, as it's stated that most of the doors on the Tulper don't lock, particularly those to the sleeping quarters. The one door that most certainly does lock, however, is that of the main cargo hold, which the crew decides to risk opening as the days and weeks following the crash turn into months. The captain's scanner, of course, reveals the code to the door, but they'd been holding out as it's against the rules to open the hold, and they'd all be docked a significant chunk of pay. Running low on supplies, including painkillers for the ever-screaming Curly, they decide to open the hold and find mouthwash.
Mountains of the stuff. Rivers, lakes, and streams. Compared to the crew's quarters, the cargo hold seems like an endless, yawning void. It's also virtually unaffected by the damage to the rest of the ship, which has filled the cramped, ruined space with gummy white foam the crew can't risk removing on pain of death by catastrophic decompression. Anya reads the ingredients of the Dragon Breath X mouthwash and opines the stuff has too much sugar to have any use as a disinfectant. Swansea, sober to this point for 15 years, notices an even more important fact. The mouthwash contains 14% ethanol. From here, the situation aboard the Tulpar grows only more dire. Actual food and water supplies dwindle to the point the crew is forced to face the reality of starvation. Swansea gets progressively more erratic, staying drunk on the Dragon's Breath X mouthwash and becoming the god of partying. Daisuke doesn't seem or want to fully grasp the reality of the situation and can't quite force himself into coping with substances the way Swansea does. Anya grows more withdrawn and depressed. And Curly, somehow, just never seems to die.
Jimmy, for his part, is clearly losing or has already lost his mind.
Give its workers security and employee benefits.
We snap back and forward in time with him, as well as into and out of reality, dream, and memory. As the situation on the ship grows dire, the text showing us the time since the crash turns from a generic white lower third to an intense red countdown signaling a day of judgment. The ship, too, physically decays alongside the crew and, especially, Jimmy. The giant electric view screen in the common room that displays a skybox of a bright blue sky and clouds shifts to a sun setting over an ocean, bathing the room in somber, golden light. There is a nighttime for the skybox as well, ostensibly to help the crew maintain their circadian rhythms, but the audience only sees it in flashbacks set before the crash. Ultimately, Swansea buries an axe in the screen, destroying it and snuffing the digital illusion like a birthday candle.
Jimmy's dreams or nightmares or hallucinations, however you'd call them, similarly get darker throughout Mouthwashing. They play out in a variety of ways, but there are always a series of similar elements.
Old-timey click-dial antenna televisions, despite not existing on the ship, playing advertisements and cartoons and the unusual, unsettling stuffed televisions sitting alone in the middle of a cargo hold tend to play. There are also the boxes of mouthwash and the cargo hold itself, as well as the common areas of the ship portrayed both as they appear normally and in nightmarish and warped mutations of themselves. And, of course, there's Paul, the Pony Express Company's mascot and the only character in the game with uniquely rendered voice lines. Paul, in Jimmy's dreams and nightmares, is his tormentor and confessor. It appears both as it does in reality. A pot-bellied donkey wearing a yellow polo shirt with red trim and a similarly colored hat. And in several mutated forms, mostly made by combining chunks of the ruined ship and other Pauls into pseudo-organic monstrosities. In these nightmares are the only action segments of the game, generally stealth segments. The most notable of these is a game of red light, green light played with a gigantic eyeless Paul in the ceiling, where Jimmy has to sneak through the cargo area as Paul hunts for him. A note precedes this segment, reading, "A blind beast, aimless and restless. You can't run from it."
This is an instruction on how to finish the segment. It's red light, green light after all. But it also doesn't specify that Paul is the beast. These are Jimmy's dreams after all, and these messages are his subconscious telling him, and by virtue of that the audience, something important. While it's never dwelled on in a narrative sense, Jimmy's odd, psychosexual connection with, not necessarily attraction to, Paul is a recurring element of the story. In his psych eval with Anya, he crassly replies that he's been feeling a sexual attraction to cartoon horses in an obvious attempt to be edgy by sexually harassing his coworker. Paul is depicted as both a plastic standee toy mascot on the ship and as a cartoon in a series of corporate motivational posters urging hyper-simplified advice for being a good employee. The large, plastic Paul in the common room is notable in that it's motion activated,
If you walk close enough, it'll start delivering lines with a fairly loud, irritating audio output.
Working on 2-bar. It means I have a lot of friends. It also means I have responsibilities. Always remember to log your hours. Yay!
Given that this pole is placed for some reason right in the middle of the crew's impromptu sleeping area, it's no surprise the standee is eventually toppled over and beheaded, probably after waking up somebody. On accident.
Police says.
Jimmy being something of an accomplished creeper, both literally and figuratively, is a major aspect of Jimmy's character throughout Mouthwashing.
In the later months post-crash, Jimmy becomes increasingly paranoid that Swansea is keeping something important hidden in the maintenance room, which the mechanic has declared nearly intraversible due to a massive inflood of the emergency foam keeping the hull together. This room is also the location of the ship's cryogenic pods, each of which is capable of putting a crew member into suspended animation for 20 years, essentially buying them an additional 2 decades of time for the rescue. According to Swansea, however, the pods are all inoperable after the crash, and the room itself is so dangerously full of foam and damage that clearing even a little bit at a time comes with great potential risk. Or, at least, this is what he tells Jimmy. But Jimmy isn't fully convinced. In fact, he's relatively sure Swansea's hiding something in there. But the man refuses to let Jimmy in, regardless of rank, on account of the sheer danger of going inside the room. It's not until Anya experiences a breakdown and locks herself in the medical bay with Curly that Jimmy finally comes up with a good reason to get into maintenance. Swansea, stubborn as ever, stands his ground that no matter what happens, nobody but him is going into the maintenance room. Jimmy, forced to find a way to subvert this, comes up with a solution fairly quickly. Employing Daisuke's help, he crafts an ultra-strong cocktail with some of the ship's remaining food supplies and its last bottle of isopropyl alcohol, the pure sort of alcohol used for cleaning wounds that isn't full of sugar like the Dragon's Breath mouthwash. Jimmy clearly has a knack for making strong drinks like this and getting people to trust the recipe. And it should obviously be noted here that he's something of a master druggist on ship. His last remotely positive quest for Anya was to use the ship's emergency axe to chop away some foam covering the hallway first aid kit. By this point, Jimmy's fed, or even force-fed, Curly all the ship's supply of real narcotics, and all they have left is acetaminophen, a common over-the-counter painkiller nearly anybody can buy. It's clearly not enough to take the edge off Curly's hellish pain, but Anya seemed extremely relieved by the discovery anyway. Now she's locked herself away in the medical station, with the only access to that locked room being the ventilation hatch connecting it to the maintenance room on the lower deck. The issue, however, is that the ductwork between the hatches was damaged even before the crash, and what had been too unsafe to traverse then has now become unreasonably dangerous. Daisuke says as much, repeating that Swansea has told him a number of times the crawl space is far too dangerous for either of them to enter, but Jimmy won't be dissuaded. He plays on the young man's sense of duty and helpful nature, which results in exactly what Swansea had warned against coming to pass. With a series of gut-wrenching screams, Daisuke mutilates himself crawling through the ductwork, emerging into the depleted medical station only to find Anya already beyond help. She's taken an overdose of the remaining painkillers, and there's nobody left on the Tulper who'd stand a chance of reviving her. Daisuke's act of tragic, foolish heroism leaves him so badly wounded all he can do is writhe and moan, delirious from the pain. This leaves Jimmy and Swansea, awakened from his roofie-induced nap, as the only remaining members of the crew who can talk to each other. Jimmy, panicking, tries to do something to save Daisuke, but he's used the last of the available medical supplies to drug a fellow crew member. Everything else was used up on Curly months ago. He tries using the mouthwash, but only ends up burning the boy and making his pain worse, leaving Swansea to make the decision to put Daisuke out of his misery. Jimmy doesn't see this act of mercy for what it is, however. He insists there could have been some way to fix the issue, to amend what had been done, what he had done to Daisuke through his actions. And not just Daisuke, as we find, but everybody.
Sorry, Things got a little heavy there, and the last thing I want is for anybody to feel uncomfortable. Let's take a second and repeat our affirmations.
I am a good man. I wouldn't hurt anybody because I am a good person. My friends are good people. They wouldn't hurt anybody because they are good people. I would know a bad man. I would stop him from hurting anybody because he is a bad person and he is not like me. Thank God for good men.
Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
Being a good man is no easy task.
Because, like, even the regrets, the bad things or the stupid things, you learn not to do bad things or stupid things. You know, all those things are beneficial in some way if you can get through them.
Yeah, that's why there are so many books and videos and podcasts and movies on the subject. See, being a good man requires two things. First, that you feel like you are a good man. And second, that nobody is trying to make you not feel like a good man. The first portion can be a touch difficult if uncomplicated. Simply research some manly things to do and then do them.
That's why there's so many self-help books. That's why there's so many motivational documentaries and motivational Instagram pages, is because people need stuff like that. They need something. And generally, the best version of it is coming from someone who's experienced fuck-ups.
And then you just need to ensure that nobody ever questions your judgment. Oh, fear works, dependence, violence, manipulation, threats, subjugation, insinuation, insults, deprivation, isolation. How will women know you appreciate them if you don't beat that sense of gratitude into them? After hours of playing the wonderful space delivery simulation Mouthwashing, you finally step into the shoes of the intrepid, if ultimately incompetent, Captain Curly.
He's in the midst of ironing out more than a few wrinkles in the day-to-day operations of the ship. First and most pressing is the fact he's been informed by the corporate office that the Tulper will be switching over to fully automated transit, and they're all going to lose their jobs after completing this delivery. It's not all bad, however, as Curly's going to land on his feet and might even get a promotion after this tour ends. He announces just as much at his own surprise birthday party thrown by the crew, who don't take it particularly well. Curly also finds out the growing issues between the ship's nurse, Anya, and his longtime friend Jimmy have progressed to an unfortunate state.
You see, the doors to the crew's quarters on the Tulper don't really lock, and now Anya's pregnant with Jimmy's child. And let me just stop a second here to really hammer this home, because it's not said enough. It is not okay to suggest a man has raped a woman unless you have personally watched it happen or seen high-definition footage of the event. Too often in this world, innocent men are mildly inconvenienced by accusations of rapes that haven't been filmed or personally witnessed by a man of character, insinuating or even suggesting a man's behavior approximated or can be confused with. Sexual assault is unacceptable, regardless of how the woman feels about that situation. Jimmy is put on the spot by Curly after Anya tells Curly what she thinks happened, putting Jimmy in the uncomfortable situation of reminding Curly what happens on the Tulper is the captain's fault, you know? Curly leaves the situation unresolved, and Jimmy, now experiencing an unreasonable amount of stress, disengages the Tulper's autopilot and crashes the ship. Curly, in a final moment of idiocy, tries to undo a lifetime of decisions, and he gets turned into an overcooked hot dog. You know what I mean? I'm feeling some affirmations coming on, aren't you? In 2011, Sony Pictures released The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, a psychological horror mystery thriller directed by David Fincher and starring James Bond himself, Daniel Craig.
She's one of the best investigators I had, but she's different. In what way? In every way.
Something wrong with the report?
The film follows the exploits of Mikael Blomkvist, a Swedish independent journalist investigating the 4 decades-old disappearance of a 16-year-old girl. A girl who may have been the first in a long string of serial murders going back nearly to the end of World War II. Blomkvist risks life and limb in his investigation, uncovering dens of aging Nazis and an anti-Semitic, sadosexual serial killer who has been operating with impunity for decades. He's assisted by Lisbeth Salander, the eponymous Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, who is an elite cybersecurity expert and researcher and victim of sexual violence. This is all sort of a lie, actually. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is an original novel by Stieg Larsson, almost perfectly represented in self-insert fashion by main character Mikael Blomkvist. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was released in English in 2008, after being translated from the original Swedish novel in 2005. But that's not quite the whole truth either. Before his unexpected death of a heart attack in 2004, Stieg Larsson wrote an entire trilogy of books called the Millennium Series, based loosely around his own work as the publisher of a small magazine called Expo in Stockholm.
Well, he started being more openly active already in 1983, when he started to write for the British anti-fascist magazine Searchlight, which is based in London. And just because they needed somebody who could cover Scandinavia at the time, we had racist incidents, we have racist groups, we had neo-Nazi groups, and they all kept growing all through the 1980s. So in the middle of the 1990s, it was time to also launch a Swedish magazine, a sort of sister magazine to Searchlight, but make it its own, and that was Expo.
29-year-old Daniel Poole is the editor of Expo, the magazine founded by Stieg Larsson in 1995.
We had a small room where we used to smoke. Sitting in that room, smoking cigarettes and listening to Stig's stories, because he was a great storyteller, a really great storyteller.
Larsson used his magazine Expo, and later his crime novels, to battle against what he saw as the rise of racist and anti-Semitic extremist groups.
He saw the dark sides of Sweden, he saw the racism, he saw the violence against women. He saw many things that he wanted to change.
Larsson himself was an extremely left-wing person, joining the Kommunistiska Arbetarförbundet, or Communist Workers League, doing journalistic work for a series of leftist publications, and apparently even training a squad of female Eritrean People's Liberation Front guerrillas to operate mortars.
Sort of got that from his childhood. His grandfather was a communist during the Second World War, and according to Stieg, he was put into one of the labor camps we had in Sweden for anti-Nazis, so they wouldn't cause any trouble in case Germany invaded us.
That's right. He became fixated on exposing corruption and crypto-fascists, which formed the largesse of his work at Expo. As such, he was well loathed by Sweden's not insubstantial contingent of Nazis, who threatened him on several occasions, even going so far as to show up at the Expo offices with baseball bats.
One time people were waiting for him outside to beat him up, and he was warned by someone that don't go out there, standing there, and he looked out the window, and sure enough, so he got bullets in the mail, the regular mail at the news agency at different occasions. We got postcards from Swedish mercenaries who were taking part in the civil war in Yugoslavia. We had threats by phone. We recorded them, we never answered the phone. We always had an answering machine. So that was the life from the end of the 1980s and so on. So I tried to keep him safe, and he tried to keep me safe, and it worked out because of this.
Larsson created the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the character, based off a personal anecdote of witnessing an acquaintance named Lisbeth being gang raped by 3 of his friends as a teenager. According to Eva Gabrielson, Larsson's longtime partner and, essentially, common-law wife, his failures in that moment haunted him throughout his life. And it was obvious it still haunted him. He was still pained by the memory, the shame that he couldn't do anything. I think he was angry with himself for being such a bad judge of character. Coming from the forest into a city at 9 years old, you have to make new friends, and he was still upset about it. I'm the only one he ever told. The original title of Larsson's novel, which would become a massive international success, is Men Who Hate Women. But there's a strong possibility you've never heard that before, because if you've read the English version alone, well, they changed it. They changed other things as well, prettying up the book throughout to make it more marketable. This is probably best seen in the actual dragon tattoo from the novel, which in its original version is massive, taking up much of Lisbeth's back.
The working title for all 3 books were Men Who Hate Women, 1, 2, and 3. And the title was only kept in the first book. He had to fight to keep that title in the Swedish publication, which is the first one. So, because that is the theme for these books, the different varieties of that, and he saw really no difference between how women are treated compared to racists. Just different sides of the same coin. He said it's the same mechanisms, the same methods, the same ways of assessing people that you find in both cases.
This change is both subtle and extreme. And in the original article from The Guardian, where these quotes are sourced, Gabrielson beats her fist against the table while recalling the alteration. A book, titled Men Who Hate Women, about a serial killer who rapes and murders women, can't be sold as such because that phrase is unmarketable. Now, a girl with a dragon tattoo, that's fine, but not too big a tattoo. A tasteful and slightly oversized tattoo just on the shoulder, so the girl can be naked on the cover. Because, sure, she's a rape victim, but you can still sell the idea of fucking her yourself. What you can't sell is Larsson's idea. Or, better, what you don't want people to know you can sell is Larsson's idea. Men who hate women. But what does that mean? What is a man who hates women? In a September 2010 retrospective column on Larsson's English language editions of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo for The New Statesman, Laurie Penny opines on the titular phrase. However, the real problem with sensationalizing misogyny is that misogyny is not sensational. Real misogyny happens every day. The fabric of modern life is sodden with sexism, crusted with a debris of institutional discrimination that looks, from a distance, like part of the pattern. The real world is full of men who hate women, and most of them are neither psychotic mob bosses nor corrupt business tycoons with their own private punishment dungeons under the putting green. Most men who hate women express their hatred subtly, unthinkingly. They talk over the heads of their female colleagues. They make sexual comments about women in the street. They expect their wives and girlfriends to take responsibility for housework and to give up their career when their children are born. She continues, equally, most men who see women as objects don't dismember them and stuff them into rucksacks. They visit strip clubs. They watch degrading pornography. If they work, just for instance, in publishing, they might reject a book title that draws attention to violence against women and replace it with one that infantilizes the female protagonist and focuses on a trivial feature of her appearance.
I started writing this video about a year ago with that phrase in my mind the entire time. Men who hate women. It's been with me to varying degrees since I first listened to the Stieg Larsson books at the recommendation of my now wife going back about 10 years ago when we started dating. It's a blink and you'll miss it factoid about the story. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, originally published as Men Who Hate Women. And that's a shocking phrase, isn't it? It's translated literally from the original Swedish, män som hatar kvinnor. The Swedish to English translator himself, Stephen T. Murray, was so incensed by the English publisher's attempts to beautify the manuscript and translation that he had his real name scrubbed from the effort, using the pseudonym Reg Keeneland. It's a wonder what else was lost, and to this day I'm happy that, by whatever accident, that original title stuck with me. It's not Men Who Rape Women, or Men Who Hurt Women, but rather Men Who Hate Women. who are indicted by this title about a serial rapist and murderer. With a boldness uncharacteristic of all the men I have known in my life till that moment, Larsson suggests a pool of culpability in the actions within this book that has no true limit. It is not just the serial killer at the heart of the story who is the antagonist responsible for these ills, nor is it just the evil men or the transgressors, or even those men who look away from crimes as maybe he once did. It is simply men who hate women who are to blame for this. The value in that statement is that it is not illegal, particularly in America, to hate. Hating, women in this case, can be done without one ever being caught if one exercises discretion, and even if one is boisterous and outspoken in their hatred of women. What is the punishment? To be the President of the United States of America? To be the richest man on earth?
18% of the women in Sweden have at one time been threatened by a man.
That rank statistic is the actual first sentence of Stieg Larsson's Men Who Hate Women. It is direct and it is explanatory, and if the title alone is changed, the punch of that statement is diminished. Renaming the book The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo both objectifies Elizabeth and allows men to read that first statistic from a position of privileged distance, removing even the possibility that Mikael Blomkvist, the protagonist, is one of those men as well. In short, it allows you to say,
I am a good man. I wouldn't hurt anybody. Because I am a good person. My friends are good people. They wouldn't hurt anybody. Because they are good people. I would know a bad man. I would stop him from hurting anybody. Because he is a bad person. And he is not like me. Thank God for good men.
Jim, I can fix this. What do you think will happen when we get back? We can figure all of this out. You and me. Mouthwashing is a 2024 indie horror video game about men who hate women, specifically Captain Curly and his good friend Jimmy. There's a clear and obvious metaphor in a man who permits a rape to happen under his watch, and then allows that rapist to roam free, being turned into a throbbing, red, wet, one-eyed, limbless, bloody, squalling, and infantilized creature covered in bandages. Despite all that, if I were to call Curly a man who hates women, would you be upset by that? Consider the case against him.
The Tulper is a small, confined ship with minimal duties to be seen to, meaning the crew has a great deal of free time outside their regular tasks. Navigation is essentially fully automated, as well as cooking and, likely, most of the ship's essential systems. Only Swansea and Anya really have anything to do, as they are tasked with the maintenance of the ship and its crew, respectively. Curly's only real job is to maintain peace and order on the Tulper, as indicated by the fact his little blacklight scanner mostly locks up weapons, the fire axe and the ship's emergency pistol.
Throughout its final acts, Mouthwashing all but beats us over the head with what should have been done about Jimmy the second he became a problem: the cryogenic tanks.
It's clear, given his disgusting answers to Anya's questions and his otherwise miserable treatment of the woman, that his personal issues would become a problem for the ship itself. A great deal of the man's insecurities come from the fact Curly got him the job in the first place, and he's essentially superfluous to the ship's operations. So it wouldn't have been a risk to anything save this last perfect delivery on Curly's record to have Jimmy locked up in a cryo chamber until arrival.
But he doesn't. That's the point. That's men who hate women. A woman has been sexually assaulted and is now pregnant with her rapist's child. It's a serious issue, but it's treated as being roughly the same level of inconvenience as the crew being laid off mid-trip. Curly fails to take action, and the ship is doomed for it both before and after he fails to stop Jimmy from committing a sexual assault. Jimmy, who knows how to roofie a man the size of Swansea and immediately goes to drugging someone as a way to get what he wants. Jimmy, who rationalizes his misbehavior and lies to himself and others at the drop of a hat. Jimmy the rapist, Curly's friend, has almost certainly done this before, and given their long history, I'd be shocked that Curly didn't know about it. There is a great system of unspoken social cohesion in this world amongst the men who hate women. Men who don't just want to rape or beat or diminish women because of the women themselves or the men's own perverse proclivities, but men who also want to fit in with and support and be supported by other men. Men who don't want to risk developing bad blood on the job site or being ostracized from a limited peer group. Those men will both hate and permit the hatred of women. they will as often look away from it as stoke it, or hide it, or protect it, this hatred. And in doing so, they create the new generations of men who hate women as well, not in a blustering and fiery way, but in chill reminders of good behavior.
They are the men who say, wait, leave it to me, or think of his reputation, or now's not a good time. They live in and are enriched and bathed by this hatred, rewarded for it, and as such, there is no valuable distinction between our Jimmies and Curlys.
She would not be my first choice, that I can tell you. Man.
One begets the other and is in turn begotten again, because they need each other.
The abusers are sycophants to the better men who are raised up as paragons on the shoulders of filth.
I don't talk about it, and I would appreciate it if it was scuttled.
Miserable totems of shit built by hateful, contemptuous wretches to bind women down on their bellies so they can say, look how high I am above you.
You're a fucking dyke. Don't talk shit about my wife, you stupid bitch. Shut your fucking mouth.
The Tulper is ultimately left stranded somewhere in space. Its entire crew victims of murder and suicide save Captain Curly. He lives, as is his privilege, sealed into the one remaining cryo chamber awaiting an unknown fate. Likely he'll awake in 20 years when the cryogenic chamber expends itself and spend his last moments alive in the graveyard of the ship, unable to move himself, skin gone, screaming for help that will never come.
To quote the opening lines of Mouthwashing, I hope this hurts. In the end, it's easy to see how people portray Curly as an innocent bystander.
After all, if you're listening to this, you were raised in a culture where the phrase men who hate women was considered unmarketable.
But consider this. If a man is afforded privilege, if he's given monopoly over violence and control over the pay and freedom of others,
if he's given the sole line of communication to power and entrusted with the literal keys to a spaceship, if all of that is true, do you think that man isn't responsible for a woman being raped by his friend on his ship on his watch? Well, what the fuck is wrong with you?